Hey guys, good morning. It's Coach Jessica. I just wanted to pop in today and say welcome again to everybody. We had a few people just join yesterday, and wanted today to talk a little bit about eating disorders. And I use that word to describe a whole bunch of different behaviors. You may think what it is that you do is not an eating disorder. So, for example, if you say, you know what, I really struggle with emotional eating, I eat in response to strong emotional things, you may have never thought of that as an eating disorder. Chances are, if you have anorexia or you struggle with bulimia or you struggle with binge eating, you do understand that that's an eating disorder because it has been maybe identified as that by a doctor or if you read it in a book. But the reality is, and what I've learned over the last 6 years, is that all of the eating behaviors that we have, they fall on a scale of disordered behavior. And what I mean by that is there are normal eaters, there are people who don't think a lot about food. They don't eat in response to emotions. They don't overeat. They don't binge eat. They don't compulsively eat. They don't binge and purge. They don't restrict. There's a whole bunch of people out there in the world like that. And I think sometimes when we have disordered eating, we imagine that all people must have something like that. And so the thing that I want you to start to think about today is wrapping your arms around the idea that what you have is an eating disorder, and that's going to become a really important part of your success in this group. If you've never heard it called that, it might be a little bit shocking to you, but any behavior that causes you shame, any behavior that causes you obsession, any behavior that causes you worry, any behavior that you recognize as not normal compared to what you look around and see other people do, is an eating disorder. And it's really important for you to accept that, because eating disorders are illnesses, they are a disease. And I think part of the problem, one of the reasons why we struggle so much, I know me, I struggled with feeling like there was something inherently wrong with me as a person. Like this was part of, there was something that was messed up about me that made me flawed in some kind of way. And if you can see what's wrong with you as an illness, then it's easier to accept that it is not your fault for the way that you are. And I think that we walk around a lot of times feeling like, again, something's wrong with me. I should be able to fix this. I've tried, I keep trying to apply willpower to my situation and it doesn't work. So therefore I must be flawed or I must be weak. And that is not true. If you take any other illness that there is, no one looks at that person and says, use your willpower to get rid of that sickness. And so it's not about victim mentality. It's just about accepting the truth that there are people out there who don't struggle with food. And I know you've seen those people. For me, I can see a person take a bite of a brownie and say, "Ooh, that's so rich, I couldn't eat another bite." I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, I'd already ate 10 of those and I'm probably going to eat the one that you took a bite out of when I was in my sickness. We don't really know what that feels like to not have to think that through. There are people out there who are natural moderators. My daughter, who is a teenager, is a natural moderator. She's keto. She has been keto for 5 years, but she doesn't have to think about how much she eats. She picks up something, she eats a little bit about it. I mean, she eats like a little bit of it. Like, for example, Rebel ice cream, right? That's like a keto-friendly thing, except for it's not friendly for me because if I eat it, it's all gone. It's not a good choice for me. But for her, she takes a bite of it and she's like, and she puts it away. Or maybe it just stays in the freezer unopened for 2 weeks. And I'm like, who is this child? But that's such a good example of someone who doesn't have to try to moderate. People who are moderators don't have to think about it. You either are or you aren't a moderator. And I know one of the problems for me, one of the reasons I could never get well with all the therapy, all the hospitals, all the programs I went through, is because the solution to my problem, what they told me, what the dietitian said, what the therapist said is, you'll know you're well when you can eat all things in moderation. You'll be normal like this person over here. And I think that actually did a lot of harm. And I think a lot of you have probably heard that same thing, that you should be able to moderate. And the reality is we get exhausted. We get worn out from trying to become something that we are not. You don't become a moderator. You either are one or you aren't one. And so what we're really dealing with here is sickness. And if you can accept that what you're dealing with is sickness, then you say, okay, so what is the treatment for this sickness? And you start to embrace a path that will lead you to wellness instead of wasting energy, like spinning your wheels trying to become a moderator. It just wastes so much time and energy. If you can accept this is an illness, what I have is an illness. I'm going to name some things that, again, some of these you know are eating disorders. Anorexia is when you restrict food. In the eating disorder community, they say that you have to be 20% below your ideal body weight, and I have found that is not true. I have experienced this. I have worked with people for many, many years, and you can have anorexic tendencies. You can have atypical anorexia, and you can restrict and not be underweight. So that might be something that you're dealing with. Bulimia. Some people think bulimia is just binging and purging. And so I know I talk to people all the time. They're like, well, no, I don't have bulimia. This might blow your mind. Bulimia is any behavior that you do to try to undo an eating event. So bulimia can look like over-exercising after you've eaten too much to try to burn up those calories. It can look like taking laxatives. It can be purging. It can be taking diuretics. Anything or it can be fasting for extended time to try to undo the overeating event that you have. So that bulimic mentality is very pervasive, and I see that all the time, and people have no idea they're really struggling with bulimia. Compulsive eating is when you feel like you must eat. Either it can be triggered by an emotion, but a lot of times you just get it in your head, like, I've got to have this thing. You start to become fixated or enslaved with this idea of getting alone with food, or maybe it's, I got to go to this drive-thru. You get a very specific thing in your head, and you feel like that thought just takes over. It becomes pervasive, and it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats in your head. And the only way you can get rid of that compulsive thought to eat that thing or to have that binge, it doesn't have to be a binge. It just has to be, you feel like you must do it. The only way that you feel like you can get rid of that is to follow through and actually do it. And some people aren't necessarily compulsive eaters, but they're compulsive overeaters. Once they start eating, they can't stop. Also an eating disorder. And then finally, binge eating disorder. In the eating disorder community, they say it means you consume a lot of calories at one time. And again, I'm going to push back against that and say that's not what I've seen. You can binge eat things that are very healthy. In my past, I've been known to binge eat just plain meat. I can binge eat salad. You can binge eat, we had a client one time who she would binge eat cucumbers because she knew they were very low calorie, and she would eat like 12 of them in a 10-minute period and just eat until the point that she was stuffed full. So binge eating is more about that behavior, the stuffing behavior, than it is about the amount of calories that are consumed. So as you're listening to this today, I want you to think about where you fall on this spectrum of disorders. Emotional eating, I think, is attached to compulsive eating because it is a compulsive thing. You feel like eating is the only thing you can do to fix the emotional state that you're in. You really fall for that idea that if I eat this thing, it's going to fix the problem that I have. So I tie emotional eating into the category of compulsive eating. But one of the things I want you to do this morning is really just take some time and say, where do I fall on this spectrum? The behaviors that I have, the thoughts that I have, the food issues that I have, where do they fall on this spectrum? And then understand it's not so important that we give it a title. That's not the thing. But it is important that you understand that it is an eating disorder. And because it is a disorder, it is a sickness. It is an illness. And trying to become normal is not the answer to this. There is another path, and that's the path I want to take you down. But you can't go down that path with me if you don't first accept that you have this illness. So anyway, love to hear your thoughts. Just wanted to pop in and tell you what I was thinking about this morning. I did post that we have our call at 10 o'clock tomorrow. 10 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, and there's a link to Zoom. All you have to do is click that Zoom link. It'll bring you right to my meeting room. I have an agenda for that meeting, but I am happy to add anything that you want discussed. If you're not going to be on live and you want to make sure that I answer a question, go ahead and just pre-submit that question or that topic, and that way I'll make sure I touch on that. If you're going to be on live, I do give you 15-20 minutes to actually interact with me and the other people in this group, which I think is one of the most fun things about the group. But today, really wrap your arms around the fact that I have a sickness. It falls in this spectrum of an eating disorder. So maybe part of why I'm exhausted from trying to fix this thing, from every diet, from every therapist, from every program, from 12 steps to everything else, part of the reason why I am worn out is because I keep trying to be something I'm not. Instead, maybe I need to accept that I have a sickness and choose another path. I don't think you can walk down the path that it takes to get well unless you can first acknowledge what your actual problem is. So anyway, it's great to see y'all today, and again, I'm very open to questions, to feedback. I know there's plenty of questions about nutrition. We're doing a lot in this group. It isn't just the eating disorder. It's also what do I eat and how do I eat. And I did make those graphics to try to make it easier for you. And basically, I just shared what I eat and what I do and what's been successful for me and what I've seen work with different clients that I've had over the years. So anyway, open to all things to do with food, nutrition, eating disorders, any of those things. And I always welcome your comments, your feedback, and your questions of any kind. I love how you're connecting with each other. I love that you're sharing your stories, and I look forward to seeing you real soon. Hopefully as many as possible can be on the call tomorrow. Have a good day.